They say even hell has a king, and inside Santa Perpetua maximum security prison, buried deep in the scorching Sonoran desert of northern Mexico, that king walked barefoot. In there, nobody ruled. Not the guards, not the warden, not even the slick federal suits who showed up just to take pictures by the wall. The real power moved in silence, but his silence thundered through every cell block. His name was Felix El Toro Galvan, and if you were unlucky enough to get sent to the Red Block, the ward for the lost causes, you'd learn fast. Eating, sleeping, or even breathing depended on El Toro's mood, and mercy was something he'd never heard of. His body looked carved by violence itself, shaved head, rough beard, tattoos crawling over his shoulders, chest, and massive arms. His stare wasn't angry, it was empty, soulless. Killers, soldiers, and psychos alike dropped their eyes when he passed. Even the guards kept their distance. In the prison food chain, he was the top of the ladder, the alpha predator. That sweltering morning, he strode down the main corridor like a king among servants. Behind him followed his 10 lieutenants, the Red Faithful, all wearing the same crimson jumpsuits, eyes cold, fists ready. They looked less like inmates and more like an army, a human wall. Men shrank inside their cells. The hallway went dead quiet. Even footsteps faded as he passed. But that day, something was off. At the end of the corridor in cell 47 sat the new guy. He didn't bow, he didn't flinch. He just sat cross-legged, eyes closed, like he was meditating in a temple, not rotting in Mexico's most violent hole. His name was Gael Mendoza, but nobody really knew who he was. Clean record, no cartel ties, no political strings. Officially, he'd landed there for punching a federal cop during a bar fight in Sinaloa. A clerical error, some said, a botched transfer. But there was something about him, something that didn't fit. He never smiled, never asked for anything, he just watched. Veterans tried to push him, mock him, test him. Gael just breathed, and that was dangerous, more dangerous than fear itself. By the second day, El Toro decided to handle it personally. Word had spread about the monk in cell 47, a rookie who wouldn't kneel, who meditated. That alone was enough to piss off the king. The next morning, El Toro marched down with his Red Faithful. The block froze. At cell 47, he stopped. 2 of his bruisers, Rata and Cholo, cleared the way. The air grew heavy. No cameras reached that corner. They called it the blind zone. The door unlocked. The ritual was simple: kneel or bleed. Gael didn't move, didn't even open his eyes. "This ain't no temple, cabron," El Toro growled, his voice pounding through the corridor like a war drum. "In here, anyone who breathes without my say stops breathing." He stepped forward, raised his arm. That massive hand was ready to crush the newcomer's throat. But Gael caught it. One move, sharp, effortless. El Toro's arm twisted with brutal grace, and his monster-sized body slammed into the wall like he'd been hit by a truck. The sound was dry, bone against concrete. El Toro hit the ground, pinned. Gael's knee pressed against his chest, arm locked and ready to snap. Silence. Absolute silence. The whole block stopped breathing. Rata and Cholo froze. They were watching a god fall to a monk. Gael opened his eyes, calm, steady, and said only, "I didn't come here to fight, but if someone makes me, they'll regret it." He released El Toro's arm, sat back down, closed his eyes again. No one spoke, not a sound. By afternoon, the rumor had already spread like wildfire. The new guy dropped El Toro and didn't even break a sweat. Some said he was ex-military. Others, a martial arts monk. But the smart ones asked the real question: who the hell is Gael Mendoza? And what the hell is he doing here? Meanwhile, in the darkest corner of the prison, Roque El Chueco Morales, the gossip rat, smiled. He'd seen plenty. But this was something else. He crept up to cell 47, stopped short, rested his fingers on the bars and whispered, "Hey, Maestro, what the hell did you come here for?" Gale didn't answer, didn't even look up, just stayed there breathing. But everyone felt it. Hell had a new resident, and he wasn't here to ask permission. Santa Perpetua Maximum Security wasn't just a warehouse for criminals. It was an ecosystem, a living organism with its own rules, feeding on fear, violence, and silence. Nothing inside happened by accident. Out on the cracked concrete yard, between blood-streaked walls and the blistering desert heat, every step was watched. Every whisper carried weight. Information traded for more than smokes. Alliances were made and broken in a heartbeat. After the Cell 47 incident, the atmosphere in Santa Perpetua shifted. El Toro vanished for 3 days. Some said his arm was dislocated. Others claimed the warden had quietly shipped him to medical to avoid a riot. But the old hands knew the truth. The king had been knocked down in front of everyone. And that was intolerable. While the throne trembled, Gale Mendoza stayed the same. He ate alone in the mess. Didn't meet anyone's eyes, didn't touch anyone. He chewed slowly, like he was savoring time itself. The weirdest part? No one came near him. Not the curious, not the brave. There was something in his presence that seemed to freeze the soul. Roque El Chueco Morales, on the other hand, buzzed around like a rat, sniffing radioactive cheese. He'd already sized up that Gael wasn't your average rookie. And when something unusual surfaced, Chueco did what he did best. He dug. Chueco was short and skinny, walked with a limp like one heel was crooked. He had the gift of being invisible. Nobody remembered seeing him, but everyone knew he knew everything. He wormed into conversations down the halls. He eavesdropped on guards' whispers. He had informants among cleaners, cooks, even visitors. If a rumor existed, Chueco smelled it first. And this man, Gael, was a puzzle. On the 4th night, Chueco slipped into the medical records room with a ring of stolen keys he'd filched from a sleepwalking guard. He rifled through Gael's file. What he found made him even more unsettled. A clean record. No gang ink, no cartel ties, no history of outbursts, just one odd note in tiny letters at the bottom. Sensitive contact, restricted at federal level. That wasn't normal. Nobody ended up in the red block of Santa Perpetua without doing something monstrous. And nobody got labeled a sensitive contact for being just some bar drunk. Meanwhile, El Toro's crew, shaken and leaderless, tried to hold things together by momentum. But fear had switched sides. Eyes started hunting for Gale in the mess, on the yards, in the corridors. A lone man with no crew, no backup, and still untouchable. Even the guards steered clear. One of them, Officer Zuniga, told a partner up in the watchtower, "He's like a ghost. Doesn't react, doesn't start trouble, but when he moves, it's like he trained with demons." Orders came down, "Keep quiet, no reports, no fuss." They knew. Gale was the government's problem, but inside the walls, no one cared about orders from above. What mattered was what you saw on the ground. And on the prison floor, a new name started to spread, spoken with both reverence and fear. During yard time, a bunch of fresh fish closed in on Gale. One of them tried to play tough, cracking jokes, laughing loud. Gale didn't answer. He just looked at him for a second, long enough for the kid to go pale, swallow the joke, and back off. That was it. Gale didn't need to strike. His presence did the job for him. Meanwhile, in the Blue Block infirmary, El Toro got treatment with his arm in a cast and his pride in shards. His lieutenants waited for orders, but the king's silence was a tomb. Across the prison, Chueco, still on edge, scribbled one question in his battered notebook. Gael Mendoza, killer, agent, weapon? Under the dim cell light, he added another line. If Cain fell, who else is on the list? The game had begun, but Gael didn't play by impulse. He had a plan, and that plan was only getting started. On the 8th day after Gael's arrival, The place woke to the wail of internal sirens. Not unusual. Fights, escape attempts, home-cooked meth overdoses. But that day, there was no chaos, no shouting, just that metallic warning echoing through the blocks, telling everyone to pay attention. From the central tower, guards watched the feeds, except one camera, the one covering the corridor between the red block and the laundry, had been disconnected. A blind spot. One more. Too many coincidences. And it was in that blind spot, Felix El Toro Galvan reappeared. He'd spent the last days mute and brooding, licking his wounded pride. Now his face was still swollen, his arm in a cast hanging useless at his side, but the fury that had simmered under the surface was back. Time to retake the throne. "This guy ain't walking out of here," El Toro whispered to Rata, his most violent henchman, as he toyed with a homemade blade between his fingers. The plan was basic: grab Gale while he moved from the mess to the medical wing. A routine psych appointment, supposedly. Fewer bodies in the hall at that time, the night shift swapping out. Fewer eyes, fewer questions. Across the yard, Roque El Chueco Morales was making moves too. He'd confirmed Gael was special. The questions he'd been asking were getting noticed, and that could get him killed. But Chueco knew how to play it, when to pull back, when to press. That day, he slipped a folded note into Gael's tray at lunch. "They're coming. Today. Corridor 6. Gael didn't flinch. He finished his food, folded his tray, and stood. His pace was unchanged, calm, light, unhurried, as if he wasn't walking into an ambush. At 2 p.m., 2 inmates, Chino and El Dogo, both former El Toro enforcers, took positions at the ends of Corridor 6, like workmen waiting for the signal to bring the wall down. Gael walked between them. Didn't look. Didn't hesitate. Chino lunged first. A quick throat strike. He missed. Gael's arm rose like he'd predicted the move before it happened. Chino's fist was snatched in midair, twisted and broken with a dry snap. El Dogo came at him with a knife. Gael pivoted, sidestepped, and delivered a kick to the knee that folded him. All of it silent, no rage, no fanfare. That's when El Toro appeared at the far end of the hall. "No second chances, motherfucker," he spat, cursing the floor. "You die now." Gael didn't answer. He just stared. Toro charged, blade flashing. They collided in the middle of the corridor like gladiators in an old arena, but Gael wasn't a brute. He was surgical. 2 moves and he disarmed El Toro. 1 more, and he slammed the former king into the concrete hard enough to split his scalp. Blood ran. Shouts rose. Men crowded the railings. Guards arrived at the edges. Nobody dared step in. El Toro dropped to his knees. Gael held him by the collar. He could have killed him right there. 1 flick, and it was over. But he didn't. He knelt down beside the giant, looked him in the face and said in a low voice, "You only know how to rule by fear. I came to destroy fear." He let go. El Toro slumped unconscious. Finally, the guards moved in. They said nothing. None of them wanted to put in a report admitting they watched the whole thing and didn't intervene. That night, the blocks were quiet. Even the guards' radios stayed silent. Gael was no longer just feared. He was admired, but he was also marked. Someone who defies the system doesn't stay invisible for long, and above El Toro's busted rule, above the warden's office, there was a name no one dared speak out loud: La Comisión, an unseen network that brokered contracts from inside the prison. Hitmen, middlemen, traitors, guards, cartels. And at that exact moment, outside the walls in a modest house in Hermosillo, a coded radio message came through. El Interno Mendoza, activate the cleanup. The real fight wasn't just against a king. It was against the whole system. And now Gael Mendoza was officially on the hit list. Santa Perpetua was buzzing, quietly. After El Toro's second public humiliation, the halls felt like everyone was walking on eggshells. The king was on his knees, and without a clear leader, the balance of power wobbled. In that vacuum, two forces started moving in the shadows. The first came from inside, La Comisión, the cartel's invisible arm that ran quiet operations through the prison. They worked with cutouts, code names, and whispered threats. When a name landed on their list, it was only a matter of time before the person disappeared. Accident, staged suicide, whatever fit. And now Gail Mendoza's name was showing up on the dirty slips in the laundry and in whispers down the admin corridors. The second force came from Roque El Chueco Morales. Chueco didn't owe loyalty to anyone, but he had one rare talent: survival. When he saw Gail staring death in the face with no crew behind him, something shifted. He started tailing the new inmate's steps, every silence, every twitch. He could spot a man with a purpose. One afternoon, while mopping near the medical wing, Chueco overheard two guards talking about an unusual transfer. Something about an infiltrated agent gathering intel from inside. Names were redacted, but the details lined up with Gail's file. The next day, Chueco went to cell 47. Didn't say much, left a package, 3 cigarettes, 2 muscle relaxers, and a tiny folded slip with a single word: cleanup. Gail read it. Didn't flinch, but his eyes closed a fraction longer than usual. From that moment, the prison started acting different. First, the holding wing was emptied. Then the laundry's workload tripled. Finally, 4 men from the East Wing were transferred to the Red Block with no official explanation. One of them was Lazaro, a hired cleaner known for making cartel problems vanish without a trace. Thin, rat-eyed with a fake smile, Lazaro specialized in maintenance closed cells. Just saying his name made inmates avoid eye contact. La Comisión was in motion, but there was more at play. In the infirmary, a curious figure began to stand out. Head nurse Isabella Duarte. Young, decisive, with a stare sharper than a scalpel. She'd only been at the prison 6 months, and she looked out of place. Too smart, too serious, too straight-laced. What few knew, Isabella was watching Gail too. Secretly, she'd cross-checked his file against databases that weren't on the prison network. She used clandestine access to the federal database, a trick her hacker brother had taught her years ago. What she found made her tremble. Gail Mendoza didn't exist before 2014. Earlier records were erased or fake. Real name, origin, agency, nothing. Reluctant to get involved, Isabella still started slipping small helps into the corridors. A door left open here, a camera looped there. Low risk, enough to buy time for someone like him. On the other side of the prison, the cleanup preparations started to show. Cameras in Wing 3 were down for maintenance. Guards were given contradictory orders. And Warden Villanueva kept dodging talk about Gail. On Gail's 15th day inside, an accidental fire forced a partial evacuation of the Red Block. Mysteriously, Gail was left alone in his cell. Perfect timing for an attack. What La Comisión didn't know was that Gail had already expected it, and he wasn't alone. Chueco, hidden among pipes and shadows, watched from a distance. Isabella had a radio tuned to an illegal frequency in the infirmary. And Lazaro, sure he was walking into a cell with a helpless target, didn't realize he was face to face with a predator waiting in ambush. Cell 47 was dark. The accidental fire at the Red Block's electrical panel had cut power. Outside, alarms were muted. Only the red emergency light blinked every 5 seconds, painting the corridor like a slaughterhouse. Gail Mendoza sat, as always, legs crossed, eyes closed. But he wasn't meditating. He was listening. Distant footsteps, muffled, deliberate. 3 men, a pattern he knew too well. They were coming. Outside the door, Lazaro, La Comisión's cleaner, adjusted the black cloth covering half his face. His 2 assistants, Cruz and Pequeño, prepped their tools: an improvised garrote, a metal pipe, a syringe with clear liquid. It was to be clean, fast, no blood, no sound, A convincing suicide. A bought guard had left the cell door unlocked. Lazaro stepped in first. Silence. Gael stayed still. "Do it," Lazaro whispered, signaling the others. Cruz moved in from the side, Pequeño from behind. Lazaro went straight for the syringe. The instant the metal tube rose, everything changed. Gael stood up. Not like a scared man, like a machine switched on. With a crisp twist, he snatched Cruz's arm, disarming him and snapping his elbow against the wall. A muffled scream. Then he grabbed Pequeño by the collar and used the man's body as a shield, diverting the syringe Lazaro tried to force in. The cell exploded into a battlefield in seconds. Lazaro tried to back away, but Gael flung the metal toilet lid straight into his head, throwing him off balance. With a circular leg sweep, he took out Pequeño's knees and sent him down. The syringe clattered and broke. Cruz, arm mangled, fumbled for a blade in his sock. Gael stomped on his hand. The snap of breaking bones was sharp and final. Only Lazaro remained. Bleeding and gasping, he backed into a corner. "Wait! Wait! La Comisión!" he yelled. "You don't know what you're doing!" Gael closed the distance, unhurried. "I know exactly what I'm doing," he said. Then the unthinkable. He didn't kill Lazaro. He picked up the fallen blade and planted it into the cleaner's hand calmly. "You'll tell them you failed. You'll tell them what you saw. You'll tell them whoever comes here fears no one." Lazaro staggered out, blood-soaked and humiliated, carrying 2 wounded goons. Outside the cell, Roque El Chueco Morales watched from a distance, cigarette stub pressed to his lip. The look they exchanged was short and loaded. "This guy isn't just another inmate," Lazaro thought. "He's a problem for the whole system." Hours later in the watchroom, Villanueva watched footage from an unauthorized camera hidden inside Cell 47's broken light fixture, a precaution installed without federal sign-off. He watched the attack, watched Gael fight back, saw Lazaro spared. Then the warden glanced at the suited man in the corner, a federal agent with a badge that read, "Sedina, Black Level." "He activated, didn't he?" the agent asked. Villanueva only nodded. "And now?" The agent folded his arms. "Now, we don't have control over him." That night, Gael didn't go back to meditating. He didn't sit quietly. He wrote something on the floor in charcoal, ripped from the wall. Phase 1 complete. The cell went dark again. But across the prison, someone had already flipped the switch on Phase 2. The next day started like any other in Santa Perpetua, hot, quiet, and lethal. But beneath that calm surface, something new was brewing. Thick, electric, ready to explode. Everyone in the prison knew what had happened in Cell 47, not because anyone talked, but because Lazaro's silence screamed louder than any confession. The cleaner limped back to Blue Block with a gash across his face and 2 men half dead behind him. No threats, no explanations. He just locked himself in his cell and didn't come out for 48 hours. In prison, that kind of silence has a name: defeat. El Toro's loyalists, now scattered and leaderless, started to splinter. Some tried cozying up to Gael, others sought protection under smaller gangs. There was a vacuum, and everyone knew. If it wasn't filled fast, chaos would rule. In the cafeteria, Gael acted the same as ever. Ate in silence. No side glances, no deals. But now, no one dared sit beside him. Even the guards changed. Zúñiga, the oldest officer on the afternoon shift, started avoiding Gael's routes. Lieutenant Morales, head of administration, sent a memo ordering that no one interact with inmate 47 without top-level clearance. But the most unexpected ripple came from Isabella Duarte. She'd never cared to get involved, always the professional, calm, sharp, untouchable. Yet something about Gael, or maybe the mystery wrapped around him, made her cross a line she'd sworn never to cross. On the third night after the attack, she slipped into the restricted infirmary archives and pulled the transfer logs for the day Gail arrived. 12 names, 7 were dead within 2 weeks, no autopsies, each marked suicide by self-strangulation. Suicide by bedsheet? 7 times? She whispered it aloud, horrified. That's when it clicked. Gail wasn't an accident. He was a piece, part of something bigger. A network, an operation. Meanwhile, in cell 47, Gael received another message, this time hidden inside a toilet paper roll, tiny handwriting. Cold. Phase 2. Intercept call in administrative sector. Target Director Villanueva, date 10/27. It wasn't just an order, it was confirmation. He was still being handled, still part of the machine. But there was one thing the note didn't say. Something Gael was beginning to feel. He no longer knew who the enemy really was. La Comisión? The cartels? Or the very system that had trained him and thrown him into the pit? Roque El Chueco Morales changed too. No longer just a rat chasing gossip. He now saw in Gael his only chance to survive what was coming. Something worse than El Toro. Worse than La Comisión. Something from outside the walls that was already on its way in. On the morning of the 25th, 2 federal agents showed up at Santa Perpetua's gate. One carried a leather brief stamped with the Sedena seal, the other a warrant bearing Gael Mendoza's full name. When they handed the document to Director Villanueva, he just shook his head. "He's not under my control anymore," he said, "and if you came to take him out, you'll have to speak to someone above me." The agent replied, cold as ice, "We already are." Santa Perpetua was no longer just a prison, no longer cells, cafeterias, and cracked concrete. It had become a war board, and Gael Mendoza wasn't a pawn anymore. He was the player. Since the failed cleanup, something inside him had shifted, not in his face, not in his movements, in his eyes. The look of a man who finally accepted who he was, a man who'd found his purpose. In the halls, factions realigned. El Toro still breathed, but he no longer ruled. His men now served whoever had the most power or control, and the name whispered from cell to yard was always the same, Gael. But Gael didn't want power. He wanted the next phase. To reach it, he needed access to the administrative sector, to his real target, Director Villanueva, a key piece in a corruption network tied to La Comisión and protected by high-level government moles. The mission order, intercept call in administrative sector, looked simple on paper. In Santa Perpetua, nothing was simple. That wing was sealed 24/7, camera watched, biometrics locked. Getting in was suicide, unless someone inside opened the way. That night, for the first time, Gael approached Isabella Duarte. He said little, just handed her a scrap of paper with one line, "Villanueva is behind the deaths of the embedded agents." Isabella froze. She'd always sensed the rot behind Villanueva's polished smile. But this was different. If Gael was telling the truth, Villanueva wasn't just corrupt. He was an executioner, a traitor to his own system. She didn't say yes, but the next morning, the gate between the red block and the maintenance tunnel was unlocked. Gael moved. Wearing a janitor's grey uniform, courtesy of Chueco, he slid through the corridors as the guards swapped shifts. At 2:17 a.m., he reached the tech center. There, on a shielded line, he intercepted part of a call between Villanueva and a contact with a northern accent. 47 has to disappear by the end of the month. No, don't kill him yet. Too visible. Let the cell catch fire with him inside. Electrical accident, easy. Who signs it? Sedena's watching. We'll forge it. This is Mexico, carajo. Gael recorded everything, physical copy, digital backup. And in that moment, he knew what came next. Burn the mask, expose the truth, survive the fire, But survival wasn't enough anymore. It was transformation. The mission that brought him there wasn't just federal business. It wasn't about following orders. It was personal. Villanueva had executed 3 embedded agents. One of them was Gael's brother. His name never made it into the reports. His body was never found. But now Gael had the proof. Anger rose. He held it back. Like his mentor in Oaxaca had taught him, rage isn't a weapon, it's a distraction. And for the first time since he arrived, Gael started to move differently. Over the next few days, he began gathering the forgotten ones. The addicts, the outcasts, the nobodies used as cannon fodder. He defended one from a beating, shared food with another. Soon they followed him without realizing it. He was building an invisible army. Isabella, now fully involved, rerouted internal camera feeds to cover his movements. Chueco spread fake intel about transfers and escape plans to keep guards guessing. And Gael trained. Every night in the dark, he stretched, drilled, breathed like a monk. He knew the storm was coming, and he'd need more than skill to survive it. On the night of the 26th, he wrote on the cell floor, Phase 3, expose, punish, break the system. October 27th began with a different kind of silence. Not the silence of fear, the silence of waiting. The entire prison seemed to hold its breath. Gael Mendoza woke early, stretched, washed his face, folded his blanket. No rush, just precision. On the wall of cell 47, he wrote 3 words in burnt charcoal. Time to cut. By now, rumor had already blended into legend. Some said Gael was a government experiment. Others swore he died in another prison, and the man in cell 47 was a replacement. But everyone agreed on one thing. The day of reckoning was coming. Behind the scenes, the machinery began to move. Director Villanueva, cornered by outside pressure and the failed hit, had authorized a simulated emergency for that afternoon, a partial evacuation over a planned electrical short. But the evacuation was just a cover. Gael's cell was marked for electrical inspection, a frayed wire, a spark, a tragedy by design. What Villanueva didn't know was that Gael had already read the entire plan, and that someone inside his own system was dismantling it from within. In the infirmary, Isabella Duarte was busy rerouting camera feeds. She killed one feed, looped another, left a corridor dark, and another accidentally locked. Every move built a secret escape path from cell 47 to the administrative sector. Meanwhile, Roque El Chueco Morales played his part, spreading chaos like wildfire. At lunch, he whispered in the right ear that Gael got a federal transfer order. In the yard, he muttered that cell 47 would be cleared out by 4 p.m. In the guard's locker room, he dropped a fake note from a supposed federal inspector ordering the medical wing to shut down indefinitely. The prison was turning into a giant domino board, and no one realized that Gael was the one tipping every piece. At 3:43 p.m., the short circuit hit. 2 breakers blew loud enough to trigger the evacuation of Red Block. Alarms screamed. Guards ran. Inmates were locked in tight, but cell 47, of course, was empty. Gael had slipped out minutes earlier, blending in with the janitorial crew in a stolen uniform and fake ID. In his hand, a hidden flash drive. Inside it, the recording of Villanueva's conversation with the cartel contacts. The plan was simple. Get to the director's office, upload the file, expose everyone, and survive. But that day, something unscripted happened. 3:52 p.m. El Toro reappeared, alone, no crew, no weapons, but eyes full of ancient fury. He didn't speak. He just walked down the main corridor, slow, heavy, like a wounded lion on its last hunt. The tension in the air was thick enough to taste. Inmates pressed to their bars. Guards froze. Even whispers died. Everyone knew Gael and El Toro would meet again, but this time it wasn't about dominance. It was the end game. Inside his office, Villanueva stared at the monitors, wide-eyed. "He's coming," he muttered, pushing up from his chair. "He's coming for me." Across the prison, Isabella grabbed her bag. Inside it, an envelope with copies of the recordings. She knew if Gael fell, she was next. Chueco, seeing El Toro march alone, ducked behind the boiler pipes. "This is gonna go bad. Real bad," he whispered. 4:02 p.m. Countdown started, 4:02 p.m. Santa Perpetua was on full alert. Alarms flashing red. Power flickering, guards running in circles, not knowing if it was an accident or the start of something bigger. But for Gael Mendoza, everything was exactly on schedule. In his dirty maintenance uniform, hair plastered with sweat, he crossed the service hall leading to administration. On his back, a fake tool bag. In his pocket, the flash drive. Then he turned the corner and froze. At the end of the hallway stood El Toro, bare-chested, scarred, sweat glistening across muscle and rage. The arm once in a cast, now free, swollen but working. His eyes, a storm about to break. The silence between them was absolute. No guard dared move. Even the cameras seemed too afraid to watch. "I was the king," El Toro growled, voice deep and dragging. Everybody knew it. Everybody bowed. Gael stepped forward, calm. "You ruled by fear. Fear's over. You want the throne? I want to end the prison from the inside." El Toro snorted. "Then you'll die for it." He charged. The hallway became an arena. El Toro lunged like his namesake, massive, brutal, unstoppable. He slammed shoulder first, trying to crush Gael against the wall. Gael twisted out just in time. El Toro's boot hit concrete, cracking the tiles. The sound thundered through the block. Gael struck back, 2 sharp hits to the side of the neck. El Toro staggered, but didn't fall. He grabbed Gael by the collar, lifted him clean off the floor and hurled him down. The impact was brutal, but Gael rolled, recovered, stood again, posture perfect. It was raw force versus surgical precision. Instinct versus discipline, the past trying to stop the future. They traded blows for nearly 2 minutes. Fists, breath, bone. Each impact felt like it could decide the fate of the entire prison. Then Gael caught El Toro's arm, turned his momentum, and slammed him to the ground with a knee-cracking twist, pinned him just like before. But this time, El Toro didn't fight. No rage, just exhaustion. Gael exhaled. "It's over." El Toro coughed out weakly. "They'll erase you. Even if you kill me, La Comisión never forgets." Gael leaned close, voice ice cold. "I didn't come to kill the king. I came to blow up the castle." He stood, pulled the flash drive from his pocket, and walked straight into Villanueva's office. The director was inside, sweating bullets, gun aimed at the door. When Gael entered, he fired. Twice. One round grazed his shoulder, the other jammed. Gael closed the distance like lightning, disarmed him, slammed him across his own desk. Without a word, he plugged the flash drive into the main terminal. The recording blared through the office speakers. "He has to disappear. Fire, accident, we'll sign it off later. This is Mexico, carajo." Villanueva crumpled, tried to hit the alarm. Gael stopped him. Now holding the gun, he aimed at the director's chest, but didn't shoot. Instead, he turned on the speakerphone. On the line, Isabella Duarte. She'd hacked the internal PA system. Now the whole prison was hearing it, every word. From filthy cells to sterile offices, from quiet guards to hardened convicts. The truth was out. Roque El Chueco Morales listened, eyes wet. "He did it," he whispered. "He actually did it." As Villanueva screamed that it was fake, that he'd been framed, that it would ruin him, Gael turned, walked out, left the gun, left the flash drive, left the truth to finish the job. Outside, sirens wailed. Federal units surrounded the prison. Sedina convoys, press vans, helicopters circling overhead. Santa Perpetua wasn't a prison anymore. It was a national scandal. And Gael, he went back to his cell, sat down, closed his eyes. El Toro limped past the bars, stopped, looked at him. "I'm no king anymore," he muttered. "But you're no man. You're a ticking bomb." Gael didn't answer, but deep down, he knew it was true. 2 days had passed since the recordings leaked. Santa Perpetua prison was shut down for a full federal audit. Cells were torn apart, guards suspended. Director Villanueva, handcuffed and humiliated on live national TV, became the face of Mexico's prison corruption. The media called it the Sonora Awakening. But no one knew the real name behind it all. Officially, Gael Mendoza had vanished. When Sedina agents came looking, cell 47 was empty. No entry logs, no fingerprints, nothing, except a single line left inside an encrypted file from the surveillance room. Mendoza isn't the name. It's the warning, but the prison remembered him. Oh, it remembered. In those halls, his name became something sacred, not a leader, not a legend, a force of nature. El Toro survived, but he never tried reclaiming the throne. He asked for a transfer to a low-security facility, saying, "The real monsters walk in silence, and I don't want to cross one again." Roque El Chueco Morales, the survivor rat, became the keeper of the legend. He wrote everything by hand, every whisper, every rumor, every silence, and hid the notebook inside the courtyard's metal frame right next to the plaque from cell 47. Isabella Duarte was reassigned to the capital. Promoted, yes, but she swore never to get involved in anything above her clearance level again. Except once in the prison restroom, she took a red marker and wrote behind the mirror, "If he ever comes back, nothing will stop him." While the world tried to make sense of what had happened, in the northern Mexican desert, a man walked alone down a dirt road. Calm, head lowered, barefoot, scars across his shoulders, peace in his eyes and in his steps, a new purpose. Months later, inside a federal maximum security prison in the state of Veracruz, a new inmate arrived at the isolation block. Clean record, no history, no valid prints. He sat cross-legged on the floor, closed his eyes, breathed deeply. Other inmates laughed, whistled, mocked, until one of the old-timers looked closer and went pale. "No, it can't be." Carved into the wall in burnt charcoal were 3 chilling words: 47 was here. That night, the entire yard slept in silence, and the fear started all over again. And you? What would you do if you were locked up with monsters and discovered the worst one wasn't inside the cell, but inside the system? The prison bully harassed the newcomers until a deadly assassin took him down in front of everyone. Isn't just a story about revenge or justice. It's about control, about how fear rules, and how sometimes silence hits harder than 1,000 bullets. Share this story with anyone who believes true power doesn't scream, it moves with precision. And remember, not every hero wants to be remembered.